Reading from Exodus chapter 32, verse 1 onwards. When people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up and make us gods who shall go before us. And for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So Aaron said to them, "Take off the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters and bring them to me." So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." And they rose up early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. God had instructed the Israelites to wait at the camp until Moses came back from the mountain. Exodus 24 verse 14. And he said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute, let him go to them." Aaron and Hur were entrusted to resolve their disputes in a godly way. Aaron was thus one of the chief judges and also to be the high priest of the newly constructed tabernacle. He is to represent the whole of Israel before the mercy seat of God. He ought to have known the mind of God as one appointed by God for great duties of leading and representing the people in prayer and supplication, worship and atonement. Yet, in the present situation, he is at an utter loss. Firstly, he knew the first commandment of God given through Moses. He knew it was wrong to make an idol. Yet, he gave advice and abetted in making them an idol for worship. This gold was probably part of the gold given to them by the Egyptians. It was to have been given as a free will offering for the building of the tabernacle. In Exodus chapter 25 verse 3, Moses told them, "And this is a contribution that you shall receive from them, gold, silver and bronze." But now it has been used for an abominable purpose. Instead of being used to build a tabernacle for God's name to dwell, it was now used to make an idol. God gives us too the most precious things in the world, such as time, resources and family, so that we may freely give them to Him for the building of His kingdom and for the service of His church. Yet, we too make idols of them. And in this bad decision, Aaron, who was supposed to correct them and give good advice, led them to idolatry. Secondly, when confronted by Moses, instead of owning up to his failure, he lied to his brother and put the blame on the people. Verse 21. And Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such a great sin upon them?" And Aaron said, "Let not the anger of my Lord burn hot. You know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, 'Make us gods who shall go before us.' And for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So I said to them, "Let any who have gold take it off." So they gave it to me, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. In verse 4, we clearly read, "And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf." Thirdly, instead of restraining the people, we read, "For Aaron had let them break loose to the derision of their enemies." The inward departure from the fear of God that should have bound them to goodness and soberness is reflected in the outward looseness of life. And they are the greatest sufferers, for they became a mock for their enemies. On the other hand, we see how Moses faced the challenges of leadership. While he was with God in the mountain, God sent him down, telling him what was going on in the camp. Moses was one with God in purpose, and God's will was his delight. Therefore, as with Abraham, God could not hide anything from Moses. We read in Psalms 25 verse 14, "The friendship of the Lord is for those who fear him, and he makes known to them his covenant." In Numbers chapter 12, in the incident of Miriam and Aaron opposing Moses, God says in verse 6, "And he said, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, not in riddles, and he beholds the form of the Lord." Secondly, God offered him a chance to be the father of a great nation, once Israel had been destroyed because of their sin. But Moses clearly showed that his aim as being Israel's leader was not to be a great one in the earth. He rejected the offer made by God that he'll make him a great nation. A godly steward shares the mind of his master and is therefore immune from the desire for personal gain of any kind. Thirdly, Moses intercedes for the people. He reminds God of three things. He reminds God that these people belong to him. Verse 11, "O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people?" He also reminds God of his long promised and now fulfilled deliverance of Israel from Egypt, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand. Thirdly, he pleads for God to defend his own name. Why should the Egyptians say, with evil intent, did he bring them out to kill them in the mountains and to consume them from the face of the earth? He pleads the faithfulness of God as a cause to remember and keep the promise he made to Israel's forefathers. Verse 13 he says, "Remember Abraham, Isaac and Israel, your servants to whom you swore to by your own self and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have promised I will give to your offspring, and they shall inherit it forever." Fourthly, he understood, shared and executed God's anger against those who sinned against him and destroyed their object of worship. Verse 19, "And as soon as he came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot, and he threw the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mount. He took the calf that they had made and burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered it on the waters and made the people of Israel drink it." Verse 27, "And he said to them, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, put your sword on your side, each of you, and go to and fro from the gate to the gate throughout the camp. Each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor." And the sons of Levi did according to the words of Moses. And that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. Finally, he did not stop at this, but implored God to forgive the sins of the people. He shared their destiny completely, for good or bad, to the complete exclusion of all selfish interests. Verse 30, "The next day Moses said to the people, You have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now if you will forgive their sins, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written." We are made stewards of the household of God. In 1 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 1, Paul says, "This is how one should regard us, as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful." Faithfulness comes from a heart that is devoted to the true owner, so that the heart knows the master's interest and goals to be its own. Both master and servant think and act as one. Let us be faithful in taking care of and using the treasure that God has entrusted us with. God bless.